Welcome back to Beyond the Helmet. I'm your host, Steve McGrath. And if you're following on social media, of course, it is hashtag BTHpod. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce not just a football legend, but someone who has become a life coach, an investor, an entrepreneur, a man that wears many hats. It is none other than Bert Emanuel Sr., because we're going to know Bert Emanuel Jr., I think, very soon. But Bert,
Yes.
How are you doing today?
Doing well, doing well.
Now, because I hinted at it, I guess we'll start with, just in the last month or two, your son just committed, dual threat quarterback out of high school, going to be playing college football. Now, of course, you have a few daughters, so you're no rookie to the scene of navigating your children, getting them to playing big time college sports. But
Right.
What was it like for you as a father to a son to see your kid play your position, help him just sort of, navigate this path?
It was really special. We've got a pretty unique bond between the two of us. Just a lot of chemistry, a lot of fondness there. It's just been really awesome to be able to share a lot of my experiences direct experiences with him and help him, kind of grow and develop, as a phenomenal athlete. As an amazing quarterback and even more so as a tremendous leader. Going into his senior season, which was this past season, we focus a lot on leadership and what does leadership look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? Because I had a feeling that he would, come out of the COVID season, and really have kind of a breakout year. And he did. And so, the numbers speak for themselves, but really, being able to impact and inspire and motivate his teammates and be that guy on the sideline or between the lines, exuding that leadership quality, that was really what I was most proud of.
And I think leadership is just such a hard thing, particularly when you're in high school. I mean, I feel like at the high school level, you either have it or you don't. So, if you can kind of alternate between dad and coach, what are some of the key things you would tell someone that's 17, 18 years old about how to be a leader? What are some of, the first, second principle of trying to be that person for your team?
Well, I think it starts with communication. I think with playing the position, when you're a quarterback, it comes with the territory, right? You have to be able to communicate not only with your teammates, but also with your coaches. And so being able to prepare every single week, communicate to the coaches what you feel comfortable with, what you don't feel comfortable with, maybe who's hot, who's not, what would work in terms of game planning, and utilizing all of the talent. I think that's a skill set that is probably not developed enough at the high school level, probably not even enough at the college level. And so we really worked on that aspect of his game, to be able to go in, not only communicate with his teammates in terms of, hey, this is what I need on this particular play or this particular route, but also, hey, coach, so-and-so is having a great season. I think we need to feed him a little bit more balls, or this is a better way of getting, our inside slot receiver a little bit more integrated with the offense. So that was really kind of number one, is just really working on the communication aspect, getting him to open up, speak about things that he felt passionate about and that he really wanted to see happen that would help the team be successful. And then I think too, really being that example of hard work, dedication, commitment, and most importantly, I think consistency. And I think, being able to come out to practice, work hard in practice, demand excellence out of his teammates on a consistent basis over and over and over and over again, is not only leading by example, but is also being able to be that guy that people can say he's authentic, and not just, kind of a one-trick pony, or, you got a great game. You just finished a great game. Now you want to come out and you want to act like, everybody needs to follow you. You're consistent regardless of the outcome or the production, and let that speak for itself. And so, those are really things that we worked on really hard this year, leading up to the senior season. And then the third thing was just body language. I think having nonverbal cues in terms of communication really speaks very loudly in terms of leadership qualities.
Bert, I hate to interrupt, but I think maybe the way you're holding the phone, you might be covering up your microphone. Right as you started to get to the third point about body language, it was really tough to hear you.
Okay, let me see if I can put my phone down here just a second.
Sure, take your time.
If that works. Okay, how about that?
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, so body language is really key. I think most people don't understand that they're speaking a language with their body that's nonverbal, and they're giving off nonverbal cues. And so, for instance, if you throw a pass and receiver drops a ball and you kind of shrug your shoulders, what you're really doing is you're communicating, that you're disappointed. And that disappointment is felt by the receiver, and it's not a very positive move or communication tactic. And so really focusing a lot on his body language during plays, his body language on the sideline, and his body language as he approaches the game, coupled with communication and the consistency in terms of hard work, dedication, and commitment, being that pillar of success, an example for success. Those are the three things that we really focused on this year, and I saw it pay off.
Central Michigan got a good one. But I can't wait to see what the future holds. But one thing you had said to me before we really started, you have 5 children, all of whom are now playing or have played major Division One, or maybe not necessarily Division One, but major college sports.
Right.
What is it about being able to make sure, or what's the secret rather, to making sure that your children are able to navigate a extremely demanding physical task like playing a sport like that, while also being mentally and emotionally stable, being able to go to school and get good grades? Like, is there anything you can speak on how to best be a well-balanced person so that you can have that sort of success while maintaining the other aspects of your health?
We never focused on talent, right? And so all 5 of the kids had really God-given talent. They could run, they could jump, they could do things that other kids couldn't do, just naturally God-given, amazing physical talent. What we really focused on was hard work and dedication and effort and commitment, all of those principles that have life-changing abilities to stay with them beyond the game of sports, basically. And so, growing up as, the kids of a professional athlete, there, a lot of times it's easy to feel like the world owes you something, that you're entitled. And we wanted to make sure early on that they never, ever felt that they were entitled to anything. As a matter of fact, the last name belongs to me. And it's their responsibility to ensure that they don't smear the last name, and that they take the last name and use it as a legacy. And so, what we always talked about was hard work. I mean, hard work can never be replaced. And so when you mix hard work into being fundamentally sound and technique, and then you combine that with your naturally gifted talent, then you typically have, a super athlete, and an athlete that can produce at a much, much higher level consistently. And so, that was kind of, plan A. Plan B was really to kind of curve their mental and emotional state of mind as they began to grow, and talk to them a lot about stress and anxiety and pressure and how to deal with those things early on, because I really believe that sports is such a great teacher of life. Look at softball, right? I mean, softball is equivalent to baseball, and just take a hitter, right? You're gonna you're going to fail more times than you succeed. And so how do you deal with that failure? And really understanding that failure is really a byproduct of success, or a stepping stone for success. That was something that we tried to push early on, and get them to understand that failing is different than being a failure. And being a failure is quitting and not providing, 100% effort, and not working hard and not being committed. And so, we made that distinction early on. And so we gave them the ability to fail. And I think that honestly was kind of the stepping stone to a lot of their success early on.
I totally agree. I mean, think of baseball, softball. It's like, well, if you only fail 7 out of 10 times, you might go to the Hall of Fame,
Right.
at the plate.
Right. Right.
Quarterbacks throwing 60% completion rate. It's like, well, hey, if you screw up 4 out of your 10 times, you might have a pretty good year. So
exactly.
It's it's how we frame anything is basically how we see everything. So
Exactly.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's so crucial. Now, how much of this is who you were growing up versus, did you have to learn a lot of this along the way? Right. It's so easy, with the hindsight and the wisdom that you accrue over a lifetime. But do you recall being, young man trying to navigate the college or even professional space? Did you feel like you had to learn some of these? Or did you kind of go in almost lucky in a sense that you kind of had some of that mental scaffolding in place?
No, I think it's a learning process. I do think that there are some people who are born with maybe a little bit more of an innate ability to deal with stress or anxiety, or high pressure situations innately. But I also think it's learned. I think it's a learned skill. And I think what happens most of the time as young adults or as kids, you're not being taught, and maybe mom and dad aren't the best teachers. Sometimes they don't know what they don't know. I do remember as a professional athlete, being with the Miami Dolphins, that we actually had to spend time with a sports psychologist, and I was very, very upset at the idea of spending time with a sports psych, because I'm like, nothing's wrong with me. I mean, why do I have to spend time with someone? But after sitting down and after the first session, there was a light bulb that went off, and it was almost like, oh my God. I mean, there's a whole nother aspect to this mental and emotional game that I haven't even tapped into. And this is my 5th year in the league. And so I began at that particular time to really soak up as much as I could, because I knew at some point in time that I would want to share this with my kids. And so I really think that there's a gulf there between parents and youth coaches, maybe even high school and collegiate coaches, and really focusing a lot more on the mental and emotional aspects of athletics, and not just the physical, right? I mean, there's so many. I look at it as kind of a 3-pillar approach, and where most people focus on the physical components. Let's develop the skill, let's develop the speed, let's develop the measurables, and you try to build like the best physically imposing athlete that you can, whether it's in volleyball or softball or baseball or track or football. But what I think is missing are the other 2 pillars. Mentally, how are you going to deal with the ups and the downs, the big games and the small games, and traveling, and your academics? How are you going to balance those things? And then the emotional component, the stress, the strain, the pressure, the anxiety. And so when you add those other 2 pillars in, I think then, you have the ability to create a strong foundation for success a well-rounded athlete is an athlete that can take things that happen on the field and those experiences and use them in everyday life. And so I think that's where, honestly, there's just probably not enough information out there available. And there's not enough coaches that focus a lot more on all three of those pillars, most of which focus on just one. And I think that's to the detriment of the youth athlete.
And you have to wonder how name, image, likeness might further create a deeper gulf if you consider now, well, I'm over here and I don't have a deal, but my teammate who I think I'm better than is making, six figures, maybe not six figures,
Right.
But that's just
Right.
another anxiety, stress, emotional damage, if you will, on trying to just navigate this. It's like this is a whole new element. The money part was never part of this until now.
The whole money part is just it's just a extra layer of complexity. You try so hard to develop all of these team principles, right? Most people say, hard work, dedication, commitment, teamwork, leadership. All of those are cliches, right? And that's what people say, but really and truly, those are real aspects that need to be taught and learned, and duplicated and replicated over and over and over. But when you throw money in, okay, money has a tendency to deplete the importance of all of those aspects, because now it becomes a priority. It becomes a curiosity, and it becomes a focal point that takes the priority off of being a good teammate or being a part of a team to what's in it for me. Even from the standpoint of, what, I may not even become a pro athlete, but I'm going to make as much as I can as a collegiate athlete, even if that means following the money trail. And so, we had our family had an interesting conversation after the national championship game. And it was, what happens if Bryce Young gets a $5 million NIL deal from, let's just say, a UCLA? What keeps him from leaving? And the answer is nothing, right? There's nothing.
Absolutely.
Maybe if Alabama steps up and says, we'll pay you $4.5 million to stay, but you still have that component there that is just, I think, creating a wild, wild west atmosphere and environment that I'm not sure what the answer is. I think I remember days where, it was tough as an athlete, even on full scholarship. There were days where, you felt like you didn't have money for gas and you didn't have money for groceries. And even though you got your monthly stipend, it still wasn't enough. And so I was in favor of allowing, more funds to go to, collegiate athletes. But I'm not quite sure that without any restrictions and boundaries, that this was really exactly, what was needed.
Oh yeah, having no rules on it was a mistake. I mean, to potentially allow, just think if your son, God forbid, in today's landscape, had to be a backup for a couple of years and didn't get to play right away. Imagine if he got a small NIL deal that he was like, hey, it's free money, signed away his name, image, likeness. Senior year blows up, is is the next Joe Burrow, and then all of a sudden he has no leverage and he actually gave away his rights in perpetuity. I mean, you can have kids be wildly taken advantage of, on top of what you just outlined, the competition for top tier college athletes. I mean, I hope that they figure something out, because I don't want the sport to kind of lose its value. What made it so special this entire time was the lack of money and the competition and the transfer portal. You're starting to see a little more horizontal movement between big schools, which I don't necessarily like, but I do think that there's a place for that. I just don't want to lose a special thing, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, and I think the special thing is the innocence. I think the innocence of amateur athletes and their anticipation in becoming professional athletes is really what's attracted people to college sports for centuries, right? And so, you begin to lose a little bit of that innocence, when there's this carrot that's dangled in front of, these, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids that typically is done when they're a little bit more mature and they're ready to make the sport a career. And so it's an interesting aspect. I think there certainly needs to be some regulation, some restrictions, and some boundaries, but I'm not quite sure that's going to happen now without our Congress getting involved.
Well, I didn't mean to get too deep into the weeds on the college sport landscape, but I just, as someone that clearly, with all your kids in just being a mentor and a life coach of sorts, I needed to get your perspective on it. So I do want to just shift gears now into really, how do we get here today? I mean, I don't think the football community really appreciates your story, because you go to UCLA as I would imagine, a dual threat quarterback, because that's certainly how you emerged the college football landscape. But back in the days where you had to sit out a year due to a transfer, I mean, you go from basically, not really playing for 2 years to all of a sudden you show up on the football stage at Rice as a dual threat quarterback, have 2 good years, and somehow get drafted high in the second round as a wide receiver in the early 90s. Like that's just, I don't think that we appreciate that enough. And so I'm sure that that's like a book, but at a high level, what do you recall your thoughts and feelings just going from UCLA thinking like, okay, I need to get out of here, to getting to Rice and actually having that chance to really get out there and show everyone what you got?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think most people don't really know my story. So I came out of high school and I was the number 2 rated quarterback in the state of Texas. I was the number 3 or 4 rated quarterback in the nation. And there was another gentleman by the name of Tommy Maddox, who was number 1 in the state. And he was, if I was 3, he was 4, and vice versa. We were 1 apart nationally. And we both ended up at UCLA. And when we got to UCLA, we didn't know the other was being recruited. And, obviously this was before social media. And so the only way that you found out was either through the newspaper or the TV. And so word traveled much slower back in the day. But long story short, Tommy won the starting job our redshirt freshman year. And so I think I only had 1 play. I think it was against Oklahoma in my 2 years at UCLA. And I decided to transfer to Rice. And in transferring, I had to sit out a year. So I transferred in January of 91. And not only did I have to sit out a year, I actually blew my ankle out in the spring game. And then I had to have reconstructive ankle surgery. And so now here I am 3 years removed from high school as being one of the top quarterbacks in the nation. And I've only played 1 down. And so from a psychological...
Yeah, I was going to say, can we pause for a moment and just talk about the psychological, mental perspective of 3 years out, blown ankle? How much doubt are you dealing with? Like, can I still do this? Is this going to work out for me?
Yeah, just an incredible amount of doubt, of anxiety, frustration. I could go on, discouragement. I could go on and on and on. I was even, at UCLA at one point in time told I wasn't good enough to even practice. So I had to play catch with the tight ends during practice. And so there was just a lot of negativity around my ability to play at this particular level. And so, so I missed that full year. So then I came back for my second spring, okay, which is going on my fourth year. And I had a absolutely drop dead phenomenal spring, but then was told that because I transferred in, that the other quarterback was going to be given, first dibs for the job, and I was going to be a backup. And so just really, really, again, just really frustrated, not knowing exactly what my future was going to hold. But I stuck with it, and I continued to work hard. Third game of the year, the quarterback broke his collarbone, and I stepped in, and the next 8 games, the rest was history, and became all conference. After that particular season, believe it or not, Florida State came down because they said they had a quarterback that looked a lot similar to me, and they were interested in our offense. We were kind of the inspiration behind the spread offense that you see today. And they came down and spent about 2 weeks, and they took our offense back, and Charlie Ward won the Heisman the very next season. And so I always joke with Charlie and I tell him, you need to cut that trophy in half and send me half of it. And so then going into my senior season, played another 9 games, all conference again, 4th in the nation in passing efficiency, along with Trent Dilford. I think Trent was 5th, I was 4th. And the NFL comes in and says, if you change positions, I think you've got an awesome opportunity. And that, after playing 17 games, only played 17 games in 5 years. But after 17 games, I became kind of the standard in terms of dual threat guys, guys that were that could do tremendous things on the ground, guys that can put the ball in the air, that can scramble, extend plays, that were intelligent in the pocket, very quick and agile. But it seemed like the game was just a little too early for guys that could do that particular amount of work on the field, but were listed as 6 feet or just over 6 feet. Most of the quarterbacks at that particular time were much, much bigger, 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". And so that was frustrating. I really grappled with, the decision to change positions, and didn't know if it was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. And so I went back and forth. And then I just decided, you know what, I want to play in the NFL. There were 3 teams that were willing to draft me as a quarterback. And the other 25 said that, that my only opportunity would be receiver. So I took that opportunity and took it full speed ahead and had an outstanding career. No regrets from that standpoint. But I think when my son came along and his recruiting started to pick up, ironically and unexplainably, there were a lot of recruiters that looked at me and said, well, your dad changed positions, why don't you change? And that was something that was very, very difficult to deal with. Here we are 30 years apart. And my son is 6'4", 210 pounds, and I was 6 foot, 175. Totally 2 different athletes, totally 2 different skill sets, very similar in terms of dual threat. He was much more, a guy that could have played back then, as well as a guy that can play now. And that was really, I think, the most disappointing aspect of this entire recruiting process, is that he was not totally evaluated for what he brought to the table, he was compared to his dad. And my question was, okay, well, what if I was an offensive lineman? Does that mean that he has to be an offensive lineman too? And so, I think, there were in some instances, I don't think he was given enough opportunity to really show, that he could be the next generational QB, 6'4", 210 pounds, that runs a 4.3, that can throw the ball 70 yards. I mean, that is a tremendous playmaker, right? And so who would not want that particular guy, calling the signals? So my career was certainly very interesting, which also led into touching on his career, which probably shouldn't have as much as it did.
It's crazy to me. And we're running a little long, so believe me, I could spend forever picking apart why that I don't like that. But like we're seeing Malik Willis. I'm blanking on his last name, but the quarterback from Liberty.
Yep.
All it takes is one team to believe in you and give you the chance. So,
yep.
As long as he had one, I'm sure it will work out. And I guess Absolutely. I'll have to leave it there. But because I really want to jump in, like, okay, you decide to embrace the change because you say, hey, this is my opportunity. And you have this, really good career. I look on paper and I see Terrence Mathis and Bad Moon as the wide receivers of the Atlanta Falcons. Can you talk me through, okay, you're gifted. You put in the work. You have all these things, but you haven't played wide receiver. How much did you need veterans like them, coaches, to really get you in a position so that your rookie year, you're immediately contributing on the team? It's not like there's this long learning curve. I mean, you come out of the gate hot, 4 great years to start your career.
100%. And not to mention that, I grew up in the run and shoot, with June Jones and Mouse Davis. Honestly, I don't think I would have developed as quickly in a traditional offense without those veterans around me. I had T-Matt, I had T-Matt my first year, Andre Rison, Ricky Sanders. People don't remember Ricky Sanders caught, the winning touchdown with the Washington Redskins in the Super Bowl and went to the White House and did the Cabbage Patch with the president. I had Leonard Harris, who came out of the Houston Oilers, run and shoot with Mouse Davis in June, Jack Pardee. And so I had a phenomenal cast of guys that wrapped their arms around me. And that was the only way I could come into the NFL my rookie season, catch 46 balls for almost 700 yards off the bat, just like that. And then immediately my second year, now I'm surrounded with J.J. Burton, Terrence Mathis, Eric Metcalf, myself. And then we set, a historical mark with 3 receivers over 1,000 yards in one season. There's no way that happens, outside of the run and shoot, outside of having, these icons around me pouring into me every single day. And so I'm grateful for that. When I was being drafted, I remember the conversation with June Jones, because Jerry Glanville had just been fired, and June was being promoted from offensive coordinator to head coach. And he calls me on draft day. I see the phone and it's the Atlanta Falcons. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I didn't even talk to the Atlanta Falcons. And I get on the phone and June says, hey, we're thinking about drafting you. We want you to come in and play. And I'm thinking, June, I've never played receiver before. And so I'll never forget the next question he asked. He asked, so do you think you can do it or not? And I said, yes, sir, I can do it. He said, okay, we're going to draft you. And so, but he was looking for that confidence. He was looking for what he saw on film to be replicated in a conversation. And so I think, I've talked to June since then, because he was actually the head coach for the XFL Roughnecks. And he said, you know, I said, June, what did you see in me? He said, I saw a confident young man that had a chip on his shoulder, the size of the state of Texas. And I knew that all you needed was an opportunity. And so, you know, that was something that I've really held on to. And actually I've given that to BJ a lot, you know, and BJ has a chip on his shoulder, the size of Texas. And so the folks in Michigan, they're going to get a phenomenal athlete that's going to be passionate about being successful and taking that team to a bowl game and winning a championship.
I love it. So Bert, I like to end on this little thing called the gauntlet. I just want to hit you with one last question, and not many guys, you weren't going to get through this entire thing without talking about the Bert Emanuel rule. Not many people have a rule named after them. And I'm sure you've probably talked about it ad nauseum. So really what I just want to know from you is, how do you not let a singular moment basically be the stamp on who you are as a football player and really have that carry with you forever? Because for those that don't know, you caught the ball, the ref said you didn't, the rule got changed so that for now on, anyone that catches the ball, you know, the nose hits the ground, it's still a catch. It's something that we know today to be the rule. You helped get us there.
Exactly.
That singular moment obviously doesn't define who you are as a person, and clearly should not define who you are as a football player. How much turmoil did you have to go through personally to be at peace with that? Because I hope that the answer is it wasn't that difficult, but I could imagine that it would be very difficult.
To be honest with you, so BJ is 18. About 6 years ago, which was 2016, BJ came up to me. He was about 12 years old. And he says, hey, Dad, I see pictures on the wall. I see footballs. I see all of your jerseys. But I don't see a picture of the catch. And I said, well, son, you know, it's kind of bittersweet. It's not really something that I want to be reminded of every single day. And he said, well, Dad, you got a rule named after you. I mean, you literally changed the game. The Bert Emanuel rule has changed the NFL, the college game, the high school game, Little League football. And I said, yeah. And he said, but, you know, shouldn't that be something that you should be proud of? And it really forced me to think about it for a minute, because I had not thought about it from that standpoint. And I said, well, you know, maybe you got a point. And he said, well, why don't you call to see if you can get the picture? And I said, well, son, I don't know who to call. And he said, well, I do. It's the Tampa Tribune. I'm like, so how do you know that? And he said, well, I've done research on the internet. And I'm like, okay, all right. And I said, well, I don't have a number to the Tampa Tribune. And he said, well, I do. I got the number. And I said, okay, all right. Okay, dude, I'll give it a shot. So I picked the phone up. I call this number. And after about 3 rings, gentleman answers the phone. And I'm kind of surprised. He says, Tampa Tribune, can I help you? And I'm like, he really had the numbers of the Tampa Tribune. So I said, hey, my name is Bert Emanuel. I played for the Bucks years ago, back in 1999. I had this catch that was overturned by instant replay. And I was just wondering if you guys had a picture of it. I don't know if you do or not. And the guy said, Mr. Emanuel, we've been waiting for your phone call since 1999. We have it in a vault, and it's secured only for you. And it gives me chills every time I tell this story. And I just sat there, and dude, my eyes welled up, and tears just started flowing down my face. I'm like, are you serious? And he said, absolutely. We felt like this was a moment in time that the game changed. It's almost like before catch, after catch, BCAC. And we decided to preserve this moment. And so it's yours. We were told that if you ever call, that is yours, and we'll overnight it to you. And I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? So I started asking questions. Well, how big is it? It was 8x10. It was done before digital cameras, so we can only blow it up to 11x15. And so I said, okay, can you blow it up and can you send me both of them? And they said, absolutely, you'll get it tomorrow. And I don't think I slept that night. I woke up the next morning, the doorbell rang, and there's this tube and the picture's inside. And I pull it out and I just cried. And I think what people don't realize is that for 17 years, I actually felt like I was the reason why the Bucs never made it to the Super Bowl, because of that play. And I kept replaying it over and over and over. I did the right thing. I had my hands around it. I did this and I did that, and everything was done right. Why did this happen? And over and over, year in, year out, month over, every season, I heard, oh, this is a Bert Emanuel kid. Oh, look at this. And people were calling me and texting me. I didn't want to hear it because it brought up all of these, bad feelings. But BJ forced me to face it. And it honestly released all of that stress and anxiety. And so I have the picture now. It's hanging on my wall, the 11x15. I've been in talks with Pro Football Hall of Fame. They essentially want it. They want to build an exhibit. And so I'm in the works of kind of figuring out what all that looks like. And so you're right. I didn't go into the NFL thinking I want a rule named after me, right? No player goes in and says, hey, I want a rule named after me. But I left the NFL with this play that will go on in infinity, that represents kind of a new beginning. It's kind of cool to know that I've been able to put my stamp on the league, and that will last forever.
Yes, it will. And I'm glad that you did, because it's given us the game that we all know and love. You gave us a common sense interpretation of a rule that I can't believe a time existed before. The BC era, before catch. So thank you so much for sharing that story. And we definitely ran a little longer than I had thought we would. So I just want to end on one last question. I think it's the most important question. And you've basically hit on advice through this entire conversation we've had. But if you can end on, what is the best piece of advice that you would give to a young 16, 17, 18-year-old, whether it's sports related or not, but wants to live their best life, chase success? What is the most important thing that they can do?
I think the focus from my advice would be hard work. And I know I've said this over and over and over and over again. I think a lot of kids I think social media has sensationalized the cool things, the things that are popular, the things that are extraordinary. And I think success does not really depend on cool things or the extraordinary. I think success would never change. The foundations of success are rooted in hard work. And so if you want to be successful in something, consistently work hard, and then figure out what else you need to do from a mental and emotional standpoint to be successful. I mean, you can't have one without the other two. You need all three. You need the physical components of hard work. You need the mental and emotional components that go with hard work. And those three things, I think, make up, the formula. That's nothing real special, right? It's old school, blue collar, get down and dirty, and just make it happen over and over and over and over again.
There you have it. I don't think you can say it much better than that. Bert Emanuel Sr., thank you so much for taking the time. I can't wait to see BJ very soon on a football field on Saturdays and hopefully Sundays in a few years. But in closing, I know that on Twitter and Instagram, you are at Bert Emanuel Sr. Is there any other place people should be following you?
That's it for now. I think, as I begin to launch some things on IG, I'll post that on Twitter, and, people can follow me from there.
There you have it. Bert, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Okay, thanks.